Hello and welcome to a video about photography time saving, and since this is about time saving, well, for once in my life, I'll get on with it. So tip number one for saving time in photography is all to do with batteries. Now, if you're anything like as disorganized as I am, then typically when you're out in the field taking photos, a battery will run out and then you'll just sort of lob it into your bag, not really think about it again until about 10 minutes before your next shoot, and then you think, oh no, I threw that battery in my bag and I haven't charged it. Well, still, you don't know which battery it was because you just sort of threw it in the bag without a system. Now, lots of people like to have one side of the battery displayed in their bag for uncharged and the other side for charged. So I typically, when I store batteries in my bag, the labelled side means they're not charged and that they need charging. The problem that I still find with that is that when I get home, I forget to charge my batteries. I just sort of dump my bag somewhere, and then I get to this 10-minute period before I want to go and shoot and have a panic. The way I get around that typically in the field when I finish with a battery, when it's empty, is I stick it in a pocket that will be emptied when I get home. So the same pocket that my car keys are in, or my wallet or my phone is in. That way, when I get home and empty those pockets, I see the battery, I stick it on charge straight away, and I don't have to worry about those times of realising that you don't have any batteries charged and you need to go and shoot in 10 minutes time, normally when the conditions are great. And that's happened to me more than I would care to admit as a professional photographer. Not good. So I stick batteries in my pocket, or at the very least have them organised in my bag with some kind of system as displayed. Tip number two is to not wait until you want to edit your photos to import your photos. So in the past I've been quite guilty of this. Basically you get to a point where you've got a beer and you've got 2 or 3 hours of free time to just edit your photos, and then you sit down at your computer, realise you haven't imported any of your files to Lightroom yet, and you've got to sit for 20 minutes while your 600 photos get imported to Lightroom, and they're all high-res RAW files, and it just takes ages. So do that in the background while you're doing something else, like having a shower. And that way, when you sit down to edit your photos, you can start editing your photos rather than just watching a bar go really slowly across the top of Lightroom, which is, I hate that. Tip number three, when you're finished with your photo shoot and you get back to the car, switch your camera to a custom profile, which is set up with pretty much neutral settings. And what I mean by neutral settings is that your exposure should be pretty much 0, your ISO should be low unless you're always shooting in low light scenes, your white balance should be auto, and what else is there? I guess autofocus center. Oh, a lens that's versatile. So typically I always like to switch back to my 12 to 35, my most versatile lens, if that's not what's on my camera when I get back to the car. And I like to set my aperture, or the profile is set to the aperture of 5.6, which is pretty much my my sharpest aperture on pretty much all of my lenses. So yeah, and that way, the next time I go out and shoot and I see something that makes me want to get my camera out of my bag, I'm not afraid that I'm going to miss it. Because typically, the thing that makes me want to get my camera out of my bag is I'll see a really nice car going down a valley road with amazing light, or I'll see some kind of animal or something. And if I get my camera out of my bag and I'm faffing around with all the settings, like the white balance and the ISO and all that kind of stuff, then by the time I sort my settings out to get a good shot, it's gone. So yeah, I like to just have my settings all ready to go as soon as the camera is out of the bag. And of course I can make micro adjustments from there, but it's good to be able to do that from a sort of a solid base and not have your exposure sky high from the last time you were shooting or whatever. Tip number four is to change your lenses with the camera off. Now I know what you're thinking, well that's gonna cost me time. That's having to turn my camera off before I change the lens and then turn it on again. That's gonna take more time. Well, I mean, there is that, but if you change your lenses with the camera on, there's a static charge which could attract more dust, which means you could be spending more time with one of these on your sensor. And if you've spent time doing this before, you'll know it's not the most fun in the world, isn't it? Well, it takes time, patience, and Tip number five, one I spoke a little bit about a few weeks ago on a video. When you're out in the field and you get a shot that you're absolutely sure is going to be just golden, you love it, then what I like to do is put my hand in front of my camera, switch to manual focus, and just take a quick shot, because that way when I import my photos I can see exactly where my favourite shots are, because I've got a blank photo right after them, basically. Oh yes. Other people quite like to rate photos in camera. I've had a few bad experiences doing that. I've kind of knocked settings and rated photos that I didn't mean to rate and not rated photos I did. Nightmare. So I prefer to just and then I know how to find my best photos when I've imported the hundreds of them while I was in the shower. Tip 6, and not one I'm particularly known for, to be honest, but check at least 3 weather forecast services, because well, that way you get a more accurate picture. You'll find if you do this that a lot of the weather forecasting services say completely different things to each other, and so you get a much more rounded perspective of what's going to happen if you check more than one. Still, like I say, if you've watched this channel for a while, you know I've had my fair share of disappointing weather days. And tip 7, whether it's weather or something else that means you can't shoot at the place that you plan to shoot, and you get there and this place just isn't accessible for some reason, have a plan B, because there's nothing worse than getting excited about going to get some photos, getting to your location, finding you can't, and then having to come home with your tail between your legs because you didn't get any shots. It's better to have a plan B and then be able to go to that place and at least still give yourself a chance for some shots than to just have to come home. That's pretty sad if you have to do that. And also, in my experience and the places that I like to shoot, typically I don't have very good service on my phone, which means that if I want to try and plan a plan B while I'm at the plan A place, it doesn't normally go that well. So it's better to have the place in mind ahead of time before the plan A goes wrong, because when the plan A does go wrong, it's usually too late to sort. Unless you're in a city and you've got 4G or something, that's probably fine, but it's still good to have a plan B in place. Anyway, yeah, just some quick time-saving tips that I've picked up in my years of shooting. If you've got any others, please leave them in the comments. I would love to hear them, as I'm sure lots of other people would. Also, if you watched last week's video and or gave me tips on my bonsai, good news! I haven't really implemented any of them because there were lots of people saying different things, but we have some growth, which is confusing because, like I said, I've not done anything different, but there are little buds appearing, which is wonderful. The thing that struck me most was that a lot of people said that it might have been due to a change in temperature, and the weather's been rubbish here recently after a period of a very nice dry weather, so that might be it. Also, it is well overdue for a soil change, so that might be it as well. I'm now wasting your time, I'm aware of that, and I've just spent a few minutes telling you about time-saving tips, so I'll let you go. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.